I never felt like I belonged in the Anderson family. As an adopted child, I was always the outsider, the charity case they took in but never truly accepted. For years, I endured their subtle cruelty and outright dismissal. The only person who ever showed me genuine love was my grandfather Theo, who wasn't even my blood relative. When he died, I expected nothing from his will. After all, as my mother so clearly whispered that day, she's not even family. Little did they know, grandfather had been watching all along, and his final act would change everything forever. Before I dive into this wild story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, and if this sounds like something that might have happened in your family, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more stories about family drama and sweet, sweet karma. Now let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Natalie Anderson, though sometimes I wonder if I truly deserve that last name. I was adopted into the Anderson family at the age of 6 after losing my biological parents, Diana and Peter Collins, in a tragic car accident. The Andersons were wealthy, respected, and looked perfect on paper. Margaret and Richard Anderson already had 2 biological children, Brooke, who was 8 when I arrived, and Wesley, who was 10. From the outside, it looked like a generous act of charity, taking in an orphan child and giving her a life of privilege. The reality was far different. From the moment I arrived at the sprawling Anderson estate, I was treated as an outsider. Margaret, my adoptive mother, would introduce me as our adopted daughter, with a tone that made it clear I wasn't really theirs. Richard, always buried in his work, barely acknowledged my existence beyond ensuring I had the necessities. It was as though they had adopted me to enhance their philanthropic image rather than to expand their family with love. My siblings were no better. Brooke resented sharing attention with me and would often accidentally exclude me from activities or playdates. Wesley was more overtly cruel, hiding my belongings or telling me stories about how adopted children get sent back if they aren't good enough. I spent most of my childhood walking on eggshells, trying desperately to be perfect enough to be kept, to be loved. The only person who showed me genuine affection was Theo Mitchell, Richard's father. He wasn't even my biological grandfather, but from the first day we met, he treated me like I was his own flesh and blood. Blood doesn't make a family, little one, he told me once, his weathered hand gentle on my shoulder. Love does. And I've got plenty of that for you. Theo was different from the rest of the family. While the Andersons valued appearances and social standing above all else, Theo valued integrity, hard work, and kindness. He had built Mitchell Industries from the ground up, transforming it from a small manufacturing company into a billion-dollar conglomerate. He could have been arrogant about his success, but instead, he remained humble and generous. When I was struggling with math homework and Brooke refused to help, Theo would sit with me for hours, patiently explaining concepts until they clicked. When Wesley got a new bike and I was told I didn't need one, Theo showed up the next day with a bicycle in my favorite color. And when I turned 16 and my Sweet 16 party was a small, obligatory dinner while Brooke's had been a lavish affair with 100 guests, Theo took me on a weekend trip to New York City to see Broadway shows and visit museums. But more than the material things, Theo gave me knowledge and confidence. He would bring me to his office on weekends, explaining the family business to me with the same seriousness he used with his executives. He taught me about investments, market trends, and business ethics. He introduced me to his colleagues and mentors, never once indicating that I was anything less than his beloved granddaughter. "You've got a good head for business, Natalie," he would say, his eyes twinkling with pride. Better than any of them, if you ask me. By them, I knew he meant the rest of the family. Brooke had no interest in the company beyond the lifestyle it provided her. Wesley showed some interest, but lacked the discipline to truly learn the ropes. Richard, my adoptive father, ran the company as CEO but always followed the safe, established paths rather than innovating as Theo had done. As I grew older, the divide between me and the rest of the Andersons only widened. I worked hard in school, earning scholarships to college despite having access to the family's money. I wanted to prove I could succeed on my own. I studied business and marketing, graduating with honors while Brooke dropped out to become a social influencer, and Wesley barely scraped by with a degree in communications. After college, I chose to make my own way rather than join the family business where I knew I'd never be truly accepted. At 28, I was working as a marketing executive at a small but growing firm, living in a modest apartment and having minimal contact with the Andersons. I called Theo regularly, visiting him at his private residence rather than the family mansion, cherishing the relationship that had sustained me through the years of feeling unwanted. Then came the call that shattered my world. Theo had passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 85. Despite knowing he had lived a full life, the pain was overwhelming. I had lost the only person who had ever truly loved me for who I was, not what I could do for them or how I made them look to others. What I didn't know then was that Theo had one final lesson to teach us all, and it would change everything. The Anderson family mansion loomed before me, its Georgian columns and manicured lawns just as imposing as they had been in my childhood. I hadn't set foot on the property in nearly 4 years, not since the disastrous Christmas where Margaret had accidentally excluded me from the family portrait. Now, dressed in a simple black dress that felt inadequate compared to what I knew the family would be wearing, I steeled myself to face them again. Raymond, the elderly gardener who had always slipped me cookies when I was hiding from Brooke's mean friends, spotted me first. His weathered face broke into a sad smile as he approached. "Miss Natalie, it's good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances," he said, embracing me briefly. "He thought the world of you, you know." I blinked back tears. "Thank you, Raymond. He was the best man I've ever known." "They're all inside. Been here since yesterday, going through his things already." Raymond's disapproval was evident in his tone. Taking a deep breath, I nodded and made my way to the front door. I didn't bother ringing the bell. Despite everything, this had once been my home too. The grand foyer was filled with voices, some crying dramatically, others speaking in hushed, eager tones about arrangements and assets. I spotted my adoptive mother first. Margaret Anderson, still stunning at 58, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the supposed grief, was directing staff about flower arrangements. She saw me and paused, her expression flickering between annoyance and the practiced sympathy she put on for public consumption. "Natalie, you're here." No embrace, not even a handshake. Just acknowledgement of my presence. "Hello, Margaret. I came as soon as I heard." "Well, the service is tomorrow. Your room is as you left it, though some of Brooke's things might be stored in there now." Before I could respond, Richard appeared from Theo's study, looking harried. He had aged significantly since I'd last seen him, his once dark hair now mostly gray, lines etched deeply around his mouth. "Natalie." He nodded curtly. "Good of you to come." That was it. No condolences shared between us, no recognition that we had both lost someone important. Just formalities between virtual strangers. The awkward moment was interrupted by a squeal from the staircase. "Natalie. Oh my God. You actually showed up." Brooke descended dramatically, her black designer dress clearly chosen to highlight her figure rather than express mourning. She air-kissed near my cheeks, careful not to smudge her perfect makeup. "We were just saying we weren't sure if you'd come, since you've been so distant." "I wouldn't miss saying goodbye to grandfather," I said quietly. "Well, it's not like he was your real grandfather," came a slurred voice from the direction of the bar cart. Wesley, already drinking at 11 in the morning, raised his glass in a mock toast. But he always did have a soft spot for strays. I flinched, but said nothing. This was exactly why I had stayed away. Every interaction was layered with reminders that I didn't belong, that I was an outsider, wearing an Anderson name I hadn't been born with. The next few hours were a parade of painful encounters. Uncle Gerald, Richard's younger brother, looked me up and down and commented, "Still dressing from department stores, I see. At least make an effort for Theodore's funeral, girl." Aunt Victoria, Margaret's sister, barely acknowledged me except to say, "I suppose Theodore would have wanted you here," as if my presence was a concession being made rather than a right. My cousins, Tiffany and Kyle, both around my age, at least nodded politely, though I overheard Tiffany later telling someone, "She's the adopted one. Not really family, you know." Each interaction transported me back to childhood memories, being seated at the children's table at family functions long after my cousins had been moved to the adult table, being forgotten when theater tickets were purchased for family outings, hearing Margaret explain to her friends that I was adjusting well, considering her background, as if I'd come from some terrible circumstance rather than a loving home shattered by tragedy. I escaped to the garden after an hour, finding a bench partially hidden by a weeping willow, my childhood hiding spot. Raymond found me there, carrying a small tray with tea. "Thought you might need this," he said kindly. "They can be a lot to take all at once." "Thank you." I accepted the tea gratefully. How was he at the end? Raymond settled beside me with a sigh. At peace, I'd say. He wasn't in pain. Just went to sleep and didn't wake up. He talked about you often, you know. Always checking if I'd heard from you, how you were doing. I called him every Sunday, I said, throat tight. Visited whenever I could. He knew that. Said you were the only one who cared about him, not what he could give you. Raymond's eyes were knowing. The others have been here since he got sick, hovering, talking about the company, the properties. Not one of them asked about his comfort or his wishes. We sat in companionable silence until a young woman in a professional suit approached us. "Miss Anderson? I'm Clara Thompson, Mr. Mitchell's personal assistant. He left something for you to read privately before tomorrow's will reading." She handed me an envelope with my name written in Theo's distinctive handwriting. He was very specific that you should read this alone, before the official proceedings. I thanked her and waited until she and Raymond had left before opening it with trembling fingers. "My dearest Natalie, asterisk. If you're reading this, I've finally gone to that big boardroom in the sky. Don't grieve too much for me, I've had a good run. I'm writing to prepare you for what's coming. Tomorrow will be difficult. The family will show their true colors, as they always do when money is involved. But I've been watching all of you for years, making notes, testing character, asterisk. You've never disappointed me. From the moment Richard and Margaret brought you home, I saw something special in you. Not just intelligence, but compassion, integrity, and grit. You remind me of myself at your age, but better, because you've remained kind despite having every reason not to be. Asterisk. Tomorrow, trust Lawrence. He knows my wishes. And remember, sometimes the greatest legacy isn't what you leave behind, but who you leave it to. Asterisk. With all my love. Asterisk.
Gửi đăng phát Theo.
I read the letter 3 times, trying to decipher what he meant. It seemed to hint at something significant about the will, but offered no clear details. Whatever was coming, it was clear Theo wanted me to be prepared for a fight. With the letter carefully tucked into my purse, I squared my shoulders and returned to the house, a strange sense of foreboding mixing with my grief. The day of Theo's funeral dawned bright and clear, almost offensively beautiful for such a somber occasion. The service was held at St. Mark's Episcopal Church, where the Anderson and Mitchell families had attended for generations. The massive Gothic structure was filled to capacity, a testament to Theo's far-reaching influence in both business and philanthropy. From my seat in the front pew, I watched as people filed in. Business associates in immaculate suits, politicians whose campaigns Theo had supported, charity directors whose organizations had benefited from his generosity, and, of course, the family. The Andersons and Mitchells occupied the first 3 rows, a sea of expensive black clothing and strategic tears. Margaret entered on Richard's arm, her face composed in an expression of dignified grief that I knew was entirely for show. I had never once seen her show genuine affection for Theo in all the years I'd lived under her roof. Behind them came Brooke, already dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, though I noticed her makeup remained perfect. Wesley followed, looking uncomfortable in his suit, his eyes slightly bloodshot from the previous night's drinking. Uncle Gerald and Aunt Victoria led the procession of extended family, each of them nodding solemnly to acquaintances as they passed. The church filled with hushed whispers, not about Theo's life or legacy, but speculation about his fortune. Even here, surrounded by symbols of faith and eternity, money remained the primary concern. I sat slightly apart from them, alone with my genuine grief. As the minister spoke about Theo's life achievements, I remembered the real moments that defined him for me. Teaching me to fish at the lake house when I was 8, patiently untangling my line again and again. Attending my high school debate championship when no one else from the family bothered to show up. His voice on the phone just 2 weeks ago, telling me he was proud of the woman I'd become. Several family members gave eulogies. Richard spoke about Theo's business acumen and the empire he had built. Uncle Gerald recalled childhood adventures that somehow always ended with anecdotes highlighting his own cleverness. Brooke shared a story about how Theo had bought her first car, conveniently forgetting to mention it was after she had wrecked the previous one while driving drunk. No one had asked me to speak. It shouldn't have hurt after all these years of exclusion, but it did. After the service, during the reception at the Anderson mansion, I overheard snippets of conversation that turned my stomach. The Mitchell building in downtown alone must be worth $50 million, Uncle Gerald was saying to a business associate, barely keeping his excitement in check. And that's just the real estate, not counting the company's shares. I'm thinking of renovating the Lake Tahoe house once it's officially mine, Aunt Victoria told her interior designer, who had apparently been invited specifically for this conversation. Theodore never did have much taste in decor. Closest to me, Margaret was speaking to a woman I recognized as her bridge partner. It's been so difficult, caring for him these past months, she lied smoothly. Theo had specifically refused to move in with any of his children during his illness, preferring his own home with hired nursing staff. But family is family. Well, real family. Her eyes flicked meaningfully toward me. She's not even family, she whispered, but loudly enough that I was clearly meant to hear. I don't know why she's acting so affected. It's not like she has any real claim here. The woman made sympathetic noises as I walked away, cheeks burning. I found myself face to face with Brooke, who was holding court among her socialite friends. Natalie, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We were just discussing grandfathers while reading tomorrow. You'll be there, I assume? Though I wouldn't get your hopes up. Grandfather was traditional about family legacy. I'm not expecting anything, Brooke, I said truthfully. I just want to honor his wishes, whatever they are. How noble, she smirked. But then, it's easy to be philosophical when you know you're getting nothing. I moved away, only to encounter Wesley by the bar, working on what was clearly not his first drink of the day. Hey sis, he said, the familial term sounding like an insult in his mouth. Want a drink? Might help with the disappointment tomorrow. I'm fine, thank you. Always so proper. He leaned in, alcohol heavy on his breath. We all know you only stuck around the old man because you were hoping for a payout. Visiting him, calling him. Pretty transparent. I stepped back, fighting tears. You don't know anything about my relationship with grandfather. Sure. He waved dismissively. Just don't make a scene when the will is read and you get some token piece of jewelry while the rest of us get what's rightfully ours. Unable to bear any more, I slipped away to Theo's study, the one room in the house that had always been a sanctuary. It remained untouched since his death, his presence still palpable in the leather-bound books, the faint smell of his pipe tobacco, the photographs arranged on his desk. I picked up a silver frame containing a photo of Theo and me at my college graduation. He looked so proud, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming at the camera. In the background, barely visible, were the Andersons, standing apart, their expressions neutral at best. He kept that photo on his desk at the office, too. I turned to find Lawrence Bennett, Theo's attorney and longtime friend, standing in the doorway. Tall and distinguished with silver hair, Lawrence had always treated me with the same respect he showed the rest of the family. He talked about you constantly, you know, Lawrence continued, entering the room. Your accomplishments, your integrity. He was immensely proud of you, Natalie. Thank you, I whispered, replacing the photo carefully. That means a lot. Tomorrow's going to be difficult, he said, echoing Theo's letter. But Theo knew what he was doing. Trust in that. With a gentle pat on my shoulder, he left me alone with my memories and a growing sense that tomorrow would bring more than just the formal end to Theo's affairs. It would bring a reckoning. The offices of Bennett, Cohen and Associates occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building, offering panoramic views of the city Theo had helped build. I arrived early, dressed in a simple black pencil skirt and blouse, professional but understated. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where Lawrence was reviewing documents. "Natalie, thank you for coming early," he greeted me, gesturing to a chair. "Before the others arrive, Theo asked me to go over a few things with you privately. His letter mentioned I should trust you," I said, taking a seat. Lawrence nodded. "Theo and I were friends for over 40 years. I know exactly what he wanted and, more importantly, why." He slid a folder across the table. "These are some documents Theo wanted you to review before the reading. They outline certain aspects of his estate planning that directly concern you." I opened the folder to find complex legal documents about Mitchell Industries' corporate structure, succession planning, and a separate sealed envelope with "Open privately" written on it in Theo's handwriting. "Theo made some significant changes to his will 5 years ago," Lawrence explained. "After the incident at the company Christmas party." My stomach tightened at the memory. It had been the last time I'd attempted to work directly with the family. Theo had offered me a junior position in the marketing department, which I had accepted despite my reservations. At the Christmas party, Wesley had drunkenly announced to everyone that I was only there because of charity and tax write-offs. When I tried to defend myself, Margaret had pulled me aside and suggested that perhaps I should know my place and be grateful for what you've been given instead of always wanting more. I'd resign the next day. "Theo was furious about how you were treated," Lawrence continued. "Not just then, but throughout the years. He began watching everyone more closely after that, testing them in various ways." Testing them? Theo would present family members with business scenarios, investment opportunities, ethical dilemmas, all designed to reveal character. He kept meticulous notes on the responses. Lawrence's expression was grim. The results were illuminating. Before he could elaborate, the receptionist announced that the rest of the family had arrived. Lawrence asked me to wait in an adjacent room until he called for me, another of Theo's specific instructions. Through the thin wall, I could hear the family entering the main conference room. Margaret's voice carried first, complaining about the downtown traffic. Richard was discussing a recent company acquisition with Uncle Gerald, while Brooke was describing a spa retreat she was planning, once everything is settled. As more family members arrived, the conversation shifted more explicitly to inheritance expectations. "The Aspen property needs significant updates," Aunt Victoria was saying. "I'm hoping my portion will cover a complete renovation. I've already spoken to the board members about my vision for Mitchell Industries," Uncle Gerald boasted. "As the most experienced family member in the business sector, it makes sense for me to take a leadership role." "The old man better have left me enough to clear my debts," Wesley muttered to someone, probably his cousin Kyle. "I've got some people breathing down my neck about payments." Brooke's voice cut through. "Daddy already promised I can have grandfather's villa in the south of France. I've had my eye on it for years." Their naked greed made me nauseous. Not one of them mentioned Theo's legacy beyond the material wealth he'd accumulated. Not one acknowledged the values he'd stood for or the example he'd set. To them, his death was simply a wealth transfer opportunity. I thought back to my childhood, to the lessons Theo had taught me about business. He would bring me to his office on Saturday mornings, explaining complex concepts in ways my young mind could grasp. "The biggest mistake people make in business is thinking it's just about money," he told me once. "It's not. It's about people, relationships, and values. Anyone who forgets that is doomed to fail, no matter how much profit they make in the short term." I remembered how he'd set up a lemonade stand with me one summer, turning it into a lesson about supply chains, customer service, and profit margins. While Margaret had been embarrassed by the CEO of Mitchell Industries helping a child sell lemonade on the corner, Theo had been fully invested, treating it as seriously as any business venture. My reminiscence was interrupted by the conference room door opening. Lawrence stood there, his expression unreadable. "It's time, Natalie." Theo left very specific instructions about this part of the proceedings. Taking a deep breath, I followed him back to the main conference room, where every pair of eyes turned to me with expressions ranging from confusion to annoyance. Why was she in a separate room? Margaret demanded. What's going on, Lawrence? All will be explained shortly, Lawrence replied calmly, directing me to a seat directly opposite the family, a physical manifestation of the divide that had always existed between us. As I sat down, I heard Margaret whisper loudly to Richard, "She's not even family. I don't know why she's getting special treatment." A few family members snickered, and I saw Brooke roll her eyes dramatically. The humiliation was familiar, but this time, something felt different. Lawrence stood at the head of the table, commanding attention, and I noticed he gave me a nearly imperceptible nod of encouragement. Whatever was coming, I suddenly felt more prepared to face it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to execute the last will and testament of Theodore James Mitchell, Lawrence began formally. Before I proceed, I want to clarify that Theo revised his will significantly 5 years ago, with several codicils added in the intervening years. All documents have been properly executed and witnessed in accordance with state law. The family shifted impatiently. Uncle Gerald checked his watch while Brooke texted under the table. I'll begin with the personal bequests, Lawrence continued, opening a thick document. To his longtime gardener, Raymond Wallace, Theo leaves his collection of rare orchids and a sum of $50,000. This raised eyebrows around the table. $50,000 to a gardener seemed excessive to them. Though I knew Raymond had been more than an employee to Theo, he'd been a friend for over 30 years. Lawrence continued through a list of personal items. Margaret received Theo's mother's pearl necklace. Richard got a collection of first edition books. Brooke was given her grandmother's antique vanity set. Wesley received Theo's collection of vintage watches. Similar items of sentimental but limited monetary value were distributed to extended family members. With each bequest, the tension in the room grew. These were not the assets they had come for. No one had yet heard anything about Mitchell Industries shares, real estate holdings, or the substantial investment portfolio. Where's the rest? Uncle Gerald finally interrupted. The company's shares, the properties? Lawrence looked at him over his glasses. I'm proceeding in the order Theo specified, Gerald. If you'll allow me to continue. He went on to list charitable donations, substantial amounts to causes Theo had supported throughout his life. By now, Margaret was fidgeting with her pearls, and Richard had loosened his ties slightly. Now, regarding Mitchell Industries and the bulk of Theodore's estate, Lawrence finally said, causing everyone to lean forward. Theodore has left specific instructions about the succession of leadership and ownership. Finally, Wesley muttered. Lawrence set aside the document he'd been reading from and picked up another. Theodore made a decision that may surprise some of you, but one he considered carefully over many years. He chose his successor based on character, capability, and commitment to the values upon which he built Mitchell Industries. Richard straightened in his chair, clearly expecting to hear his name. Uncle Gerald did the same. The controlling interest in Mitchell Industries, constituting 85% of the company's shares, valued at approximately $2.4 billion, along with the primary real estate holdings including the Mitchell Building, the Lake Tahoe property, the South of France Villa, and Theo's primary residence. Lawrence paused, looking directly at me, are bequeathed to Natalie Elizabeth Anderson. The silence that followed was absolute. For several seconds, no one moved or spoke as the announcement hung in the air. Then, chaos erupted. This is preposterous, Uncle Gerald shouted, face turning purple. She's not even blood, Aunt Victoria screeched. Richard sat frozen, his face ashen, while beside him, Margaret actually swayed in her seat before slumping against him. I don't understand, she kept repeating. I don't understand. Brooke jumped to her feet, sending her chair crashing backward. This is a mistake. She manipulated him. She's been scheming for years. Wesley knocked over a water glass, the liquid spreading across the polished table as he stared at me with naked hatred. You conniving little bitch, he snarled. Through it all, I remained still, as shocked as they were. This couldn't be right. Theo had left me kind words and support throughout my life, but his entire fortune? The company? It made no sense. Lawrence raised his hands for quiet, but the family continued shouting accusations and threats. "I'll contest this," Uncle Gerald declared. "No court will uphold this travesty." "She must have coerced him when he was declining mentally," Margaret said, recovering enough to turn her shock into calculated accusations. Lawrence reached for a remote control on the table. "Theodore anticipated your reactions," he said loudly over the din. He prepared a video message to be played at this point. The wall behind Lawrence slid open to reveal a large screen. As it flickered to life, the room gradually quieted, all eyes drawn to the image of Theo, recorded perhaps 6 months earlier. He looked frail, but his eyes were clear and sharp, his voice steady. "Hello, family. If you're watching this, then Lawrence has just informed you of my decision regarding the succession of Mitchell Industries and the distribution of my assets. I imagine some of you are surprised. Others are angry. Perhaps all of you are wondering why I would leave the bulk of my fortune to Natalie rather than my real family." Theo's use of air quotes around real made several people shift uncomfortably. "For the past 5 years, I have been conducting what you might call an extended experiment. After witnessing how Natalie was treated at the company Christmas party, I realized I needed to be more deliberate about my legacy. I began testing each of you, presenting business problems, ethical dilemmas, and opportunities to demonstrate your character." The family exchanged confused glances as Theo continued. "Richard, when I asked your opinion on cutting benefits to increase short-term profits, you immediately agreed without considering the impact on employees. Margaret, when I introduced you to the son of our janitor who needed college recommendations, you brushed him off because his father wasn't important. Wesley, I gave you 3 chances to manage small projects for the company. Each time, you delegated all the work while taking the credit. Brooke, when I offered to fund a charitable initiative of your choice, you created a foundation that spent more on launch parties than on actual charitable work." Theo's gaze seemed to bore into each person he named. No one could meet his eyes, even through a screen. I could go on, but the pattern was clear across the entire family. When given opportunities to demonstrate compassion, integrity, or work ethic, most of you failed. The exceptions were Natalie and, to a lesser extent, young Kyle, who at least showed potential. Theo shifted in his seat, leaning closer to the camera. "What none of you knew is that for the past 5 years, Natalie has been working closely with me to learn every aspect of Mitchell Industries. While maintaining her own career to avoid your scrutiny, she has completed an executive MBA program I privately funded and has been meeting regularly with my executive team under the pseudonym Elizabeth James. The marketing strategies you've praised for the past 2 years, Richard? Those were Natalie's. The restructuring plan the board approved last quarter? Also Natalie's work." My heart was pounding as pieces fell into place. The consulting work Theo had asked me to do, the meetings he'd arranged with business associates who never used my real name, the courses he'd encouraged me to take, it had all been preparation. Natalie has demonstrated every quality I value: intelligence without arrogance, ambition without ruthlessness, and compassion without weakness. She understands that business is about more than profit. It's about creating value, supporting communities, and leaving a positive legacy. Theo's expression softened as he continued. "Natalie, I know this is a shock to you too. I kept my plan secret because I wanted to protect you from the backlash until it was too late for anyone to interfere. I have complete confidence in your ability to lead Mitchell Industries into the future. The executive team is aware of my decision and supports you fully." He turned his gaze back to the wider family. "To the rest of you, this is not done out of malice. Each of you will receive a generous trust fund that will ensure your comfortable living. But Mitchell Industries deserves leadership that embodies its values, not simply its DNA. Blood makes you related, behavior makes you family. And Natalie, through her actions rather than her birth, has proven herself to be the most worthy member of my family." With that, the video ended, leaving the room in stunned silence. Lawrence turned on the lights and looked at me. "Natalie, as the new majority shareholder and chairman of Mitchell Industries, would you like to say anything?" All eyes turned to me, a mixture of shock, anger, and in a few cases, dawning calculation. In that moment, I realized the choice before me. I could reject the inheritance, escape the family that had never wanted me, and return to my quiet life. Or I could accept Theo's final gift, not just wealth, but purpose, responsibility, and perhaps most importantly, vindication. Slowly, I stood and moved to the head of the table, Theo's position, now mine. I think grandfather has said everything that needs to be said today, I stated calmly. I accept the responsibilities he has entrusted to me. Lawrence, please continue with the proceedings. As I took my seat at the head of the table, I watched the color drain from my adoptive parents' faces. The expressions around the table ranged from horror to disbelief to hatred. But for the first time in my life among the Andersons, I felt no need to apologize for existing, no urge to make myself smaller. Theo had seen me, truly seen me, and in his final act, had ensured everyone else would have to see me too. The rest of the will reading passed in a blur of legal terminology and shocked silence. Lawrence outlined the trusts established for each family member, generous enough to maintain their comfortable lifestyles, but not extravagant enough to fund their more lavish expectations. The company's shares were non-transferable for 10 years, preventing any quick sales. The properties came with similar restrictions. Theo had thought of everything. As Lawrence concluded the formal proceedings, the stunned silence erupted into chaos once more. "This is elder abuse," Uncle Gerald shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "She manipulated a sick old man." "I've already called our attorney," Margaret hissed, her composed facade cracking completely. "We'll fight this with everything we have." Brooke was openly sobbing now, though whether from genuine grief or thwarted expectations was hard to tell. "The French villa was supposed to be mine. Daddy promised." Wesley lurched to his feet and pointed at me. "You think you can just waltz in and take everything that should have been ours? You're nothing. You're nobody." Lawrence intervened, his voice cutting through the noise. "I should inform all of you that Theodore underwent extensive psychological evaluations before each revision of his will. The documentation is ironclad. You're welcome to contest it, but you should know that Theodore included a clause stating that anyone who challenges the will and loses will forfeit their trust fund entirely. That gave many of them pause. The risk of losing guaranteed millions for a slim chance at billions was not a gamble most were willing to take. Richard, who had been silent since the announcement, finally spoke. "Natalie, be reasonable. You have no experience running a company of this size. The board will never accept you." "Actually," Lawrence interjected, "Theodore met with the board 3 months ago to discuss succession planning. They're fully aware of Natalie's involvement in recent company initiatives under her pseudonym and have unanimously approved her appointment as chairman." As this new information sank in, I noticed the family's approach shifting before my eyes. Anger and denial were gradually being replaced by calculation and forced smiles. "Natalie, darling," Margaret said, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. "This is all such a shock. Perhaps we should discuss this as a family over dinner. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement that benefits everyone." "I think we've had enough family discussions for one day," I replied evenly. "Lawrence has the paperwork ready for all trust fund disbursements. I suggest everyone review their documents." Aunt Victoria approached next, her earlier outrage replaced with an ingratiating smile. "Natalie, dear, I've always thought you had such potential. I'd love to discuss some ideas I have for expanding the Mitchell Foundation's work." One by one, they approached, not with apologies for years of exclusion and cruelty, but with thinly veiled attempts to secure advantages under the new power structure. Wesley asked about a senior position in the company. Brooke suggested a family discount for using the French villa. Uncle Gerald proposed a strategic advisory role for himself. I listened to each pitch with the same polite, neutral expression Theo had always maintained during business negotiations. When they had all said their piece, I stood. "I appreciate everyone's sudden interest and collaboration. For now, I need time to review the company's current position and consult with the executive team. Lawrence will be in touch regarding any decisions about roles within Mitchell Industries." As the family reluctantly gathered their belongings, Lawrence's assistant appeared at the door. "Excuse me, Ms. Anderson." The executive team is assembled in the conference room next door, awaiting your introduction as chairman. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The family watched, stunned, as a group of distinguished business leaders filed into the hallway, nodding respectfully to me. "If you'll excuse me," I said to my shell-shocked family, "I have a company to run." In the adjacent conference room, I was greeted by the top executives of Mitchell Industries, people I had met over the years through Theo, though most had known me only as Elizabeth James. Now, they welcomed me by my real name, each expressing confidence in the transition. "Theo spoke often of your vision for the company," said Helena Chen, the CFO. "We're looking forward to implementing the expansion plans you outlined last quarter." "Your analysis of the European market opportunities was impressive," added Marcus Rivera, head of international operations. "The board is particularly excited about the sustainability initiatives you proposed." As we discussed immediate priorities and transition plans, the reality of my new position began to sink in. This wasn't just about wealth or vindication. Theo had entrusted me with a company he'd built from nothing, with the livelihoods of thousands of employees, with a legacy that extended far beyond the Anderson family drama. Later, when the executives had departed and only Lawrence remained, I finally allowed myself a moment of vulnerability. Did he really think I could do this? I asked quietly. "Run a billion-dollar company?" Lawrence smiled. "Theo never did anything without absolute certainty. He spent 5 years preparing you, testing you, and watching you exceed every expectation. His faith in you wasn't sentimental, it was based on clear evidence of your capabilities." He handed me a thick binder. "This contains Theo's personal notes about you, going back to when you were a child. Read it when you're ready. It might help answer some of your questions." As I left the office building, I was surprised to find Raymond waiting by a sleek black car. "Mr. Theo arranged it all," he explained with a gentle smile. "Said you'd need a good driver who knew when to keep quiet and when to offer a friendly ear. If you'll have me, Miss Natalie, I'd be honored to continue in his service by serving you." It was this small kindness, Theo ensuring I would have at least one ally in my new position, that finally broke through my composure. In the privacy of the car, with Raymond discreetly focused on driving, I allowed myself to cry for the first time since learning of Theo's death. Not just tears of grief, but of gratitude, overwhelm, and something that felt surprisingly like peace. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of activity. Mitchell Industries had flourished under my leadership, with stock prices rising 15% and employee satisfaction scores at an all-time high. My first major initiative had been establishing the Theodore Mitchell Foundation for Children in Need, with a special focus on supporting orphan children and foster families, a cause deeply personal to me. The corporate headquarters had been transformed as well. Where once it had been an intimidating fortress of glass and steel, I had implemented changes to make it more welcoming: a daycare center for employees' children, common areas where executives and entry-level staff could mingle, and a rooftop garden inspired by Theo's love of horticulture, tended by Raymond in his new role as landscape director. The family had scattered to lick their wounds, each dealing with the new reality in different ways. Margaret and Richard had retreated to their vacation home in Palm Beach, making occasional overtures about reconciliation, always with thinly veiled suggestions about company involvement attached. "Natalie, darling," Margaret had cooed over the phone just last week. "We've been thinking about how much we miss you. Families should stick together, don't you think? Richard has some wonderful ideas for the Asian market expansion." I had politely but firmly maintained professional boundaries, offering only, "The board is always open to well-developed proposals submitted through proper channels." Brooke had initially attempted to contest the will but backed down when reminded of the clause that would void her trust fund. Instead, she had pivoted to leveraging her connection to me and her social media presence, suddenly proud of her CEO sister, after years of barely acknowledging my existence. I allowed it, seeing it as harmless and perhaps even useful for humanizing the company's image. Wesley had surprised everyone. After his initial fury subsided, he had approached me with unexpected humility. "I know I don't deserve any favors," he had said, fidgeting in the visitor's chair in my office. but I want a chance to prove I can change. A real job, no special treatment. I'll start at the bottom if I have to. Something in his sincerity had touched me. I had assigned him to the corporate social responsibility division, far from any financial controls, but in a position where he might develop the empathy he'd always lacked. To everyone's surprise, especially his own, he was thriving, showing genuine passion for community engagement projects. Uncle Gerald had moved to Florida, bitter but comfortable with his trust fund. Aunt Victoria still called regularly with investment opportunities that I politely declined. Most of the extended family maintained a cordial but distant relationship, neither antagonistic nor warm. The most unexpected development had been with my cousin Kyle. After observing the changes I was implementing at Mitchell Industries, he had approached me with thoughtful questions and genuine interest. "Grandfather was right about you," he had admitted during a lunch meeting. "I always thought business was just about making money, but watching what you're doing, it's different. It matters." I had offered him an entry-level position in product development, making it clear he would receive no special treatment. He had accepted eagerly and was proving to be intelligent and hardworking when not under his father's influence. Today marked 6 months since the will reading that had changed everything. I had arranged to visit Theo's grave alone, bringing a simple bouquet of his favorite orchids, cultivated by Raymond from Theo's original collection. The cemetery was peaceful, autumn leaves creating a golden canopy above the Mitchell family plot. I placed the flowers against the elegant granite headstone and sat on the small bench facing it. 6 months, I said softly. I wish you could see what we've accomplished already. The education initiative for employees' children just launched. The sustainability targets you always wanted? We're ahead of schedule. The board actually applauded at the last meeting. Can you believe it? The wind rustled through the leaves, and I could almost hear Theo's proud chuckle. I read your notes, I continued. All those years, you were watching, planning. You saw potential in me when no one else did, not even myself sometimes. I traced my fingers over his name on the headstone. I was angry at first, not about the inheritance, but about the secrecy. All those years of feeling like an outsider, wondering if I belonged anywhere. You could have told me what you were planning. I smiled ruefully. But you were right as usual. If I'd known, it would have changed how I approached everything. I might have tried to please you instead of finding my own way. And the family would have found a way to interfere. A sense of peace settled over me as I sat there, reflecting on the journey from unwanted adopted child to one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country. The inheritance had given me position and resources, but Theo had given me something far more valuable long before that: belief in myself and a model of integrity to aspire to. I'm not running the company for revenge, I said softly. I thought I might wanna after years of being treated as less than. But that's not your legacy, and it's not who I want to be. I'm building something that honors what you created, something that lasts beyond all of us. As I stood to leave, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the autumn sunshine, a sense of Theo's presence and approval. The path ahead would have challenges, no doubt. The family dynamics would continue to evolve. The business world would present new obstacles and opportunities. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't navigating it all alone. In giving me his material legacy, Theo had confirmed what his love had been telling me all along, that family isn't defined by blood but by choice, by actions, by consistent love. I had been searching for belonging my entire life, never realizing that Theo had already created a place for me, not just in his will, but in his heart. As I walked back to where Raymond waited with the car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The little girl who had never felt good enough, who had always been reminded she wasn't real family, was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew exactly who she was and where she belonged. I turned back one last time toward Theo's grave. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." What would you do if you were in Natalie's position? Would you have given any family members a second chance like she did with Wesley, or would you have cut ties completely? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of family drama and sweet justice, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will have you cheering for the underdog. Don't forget to share with anyone who's ever felt like an outsider. Sometimes life has a way of turning the tables when we least expect it. Thank you for watching, and remember, true family is defined by love, not by blood.